everyone. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. Video of a 5-year-old being paddled by Jasper, Georgia school officials for misbehaving. In Murfreesboro, Tennessee, several students aged 6 to 11 are handcuffed and arrested for not stopping a fight. And here in Gloucester, deputies found a naked, starving girl in a cage and the remains of a baby under a nearby shed. Disturbing stories of child abuse. Or are they? Up next on Another View on Health, the definition of child abuse, how to prevent it, and learn about who stands up for our children. Stay tuned. Another View on Health is next, right after this news from NPR.
Discussing today's topics from an African American perspective, this is Another View.
Purple rain, rain, purple rain. Purple rain, purple rain. Purple rain, purple rain. I can't, it's hard.
One musical genius, Stevie Wonder, paying tribute to another musical genius, Prince, this morning on CBS This Morning, and becoming emotional about the fact that we lost a great icon, musical icon, yesterday. Prince fans all around the world are mourning the sudden death of Prince and celebrating the genius of his music. Lisa Godley will have more on the life of Prince later in today's broadcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Another View. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. Thank you so much for joining us today. I must start today's show by thanking all of you for supporting us so incredibly well during our fundraiser last Friday. We had a $2,000 match and we totaled $11,000 in 1 hour. So we are so very grateful to all of our listeners, all of you who became members of WHRO and WHRV, and we thank you so much. So on behalf of Victor and Lisa and myself, thank you, thank you, thank you. And I also want to say hello and welcome to the Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority. If you've been in Virginia Beach or if you go to the beach this weekend, you're going to see a lot of pink and green in the area. Alpha Kappa Alpha is the first Greek-lettered sorority incorporated by Black women, and we have a interview on our website from the Mid-Atlantic Regional Director Joyce Henderson, who talks about what people can expect this weekend. So we welcome all of you all from the regional coming into town. Thank you for listening to Another View. That is fantastic. So April is National Child Abuse Month, a month when we focus on efforts to prevent our youngest population from becoming victims of mental and physical abuse, and about those on the front lines who stand up for abused children. It's a tough topic, but a necessary one for us to confront head on. My co-host for Another View on Health, cardiologist Dr. Keith Newby, is here. Keith, how you doing?
I'm doing well, and yourself?
Good, I'm fine, and happy anniversary to you and your wife.
Thank you very much. And congratulations on your fundraising efforts last week. I know it's all due to you.
Thank you. That's really kind. I appreciate that. Along with CHKD's Dr. Michelle Clayton, who is a child abuse pediatrician and an expert in this field. Dr. Clayton, welcome to Another View.
Thank you so much.
Glad to have you here today. And Ms. Natasha Knight, she is the coordinator of Portsmouth CASA, which stands for Court-Appointed Special Advocates. How are you, Natasha?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you.
Great, and thank you so much for joining us. So this is a tough topic. And people, I think, have all kinds of impressions and thoughts. But Dr. Clayton, I'm going to start with you. What is the actual definition of child abuse? What does it mean?
It's a complicated definition. It really encompasses a wide variety of types of abuse or neglect or behaviors that don't foster the good health and development of children. So in its most basic form, it's allowing or perpetrating different types of harm on a child, such as hurting them physically or allowing them to be hurt physically, sexually abusing them or allowing them to be sexually abused, or failing to provide for their physical or emotional needs, or even neglecting their educational needs. So it's really complicated. It really encompasses all the different types of abuse and neglect that can occur, but in its most basic form, that's what child abuse is.
And Natasha, is it one of those things that, as they say about pornography, you know it when you see it? I mean, in terms of it being sometimes difficult, particularly if it's a psychological abuse, would you say? Is it tough to tell sometimes?
Emotional abuse is the most difficult abuse to identify, for sure. And I don't think everybody knows the signs. So I think it depends on your background and what you've been exposed to. You may not necessarily realize that you're witnessing abuse, but I think it's sometimes it can just be a common sense kind of thing. Like you just have an inkling that something's not right, and so that may lead you to ask questions or just keep an extra eye out. It's difficult at times.
From the research that I've done, African American children are labeled as being abused twice as much as white children. And from some of the things that I was reading, they were saying a lot of it was about or had something to do also with the bias of the caretakers or the people from CASA or whomever is working in the system. But now there's the newer study that came out that said it was more poverty than it is racial in terms of why so many African American kids in particular are brought into the system because of child abuse.
I certainly think that's true. I mean, when it comes to who gets referred for concerns for abuse and neglect, certainly with neglect concerns, you have a bias toward kids in lower socioeconomic classes being referred. And that's also true for physical abuse. And if you're Black in this country, you're more likely to be in the lower socioeconomic groups. You know, there's a higher proportion of Blacks who are poor compared with people in other racial groups. And so that surely does come into play, and it really depends upon the bias of the reporter. The school system does a lot of reporting. Health professionals do a lot of reporting. And so the particular biases of the reporter absolutely come into play.
Anything you want to add, Natasha?
Well, I mean, for sure we know that child abuse knows no boundaries when it comes to racial and socioeconomic status. So even though African American children are more likely to be identified, that doesn't mean it's not happening to other races. So it's just important to keep that in mind, that a lot of times if you have money and you have family who can kind of hide these things that are happening, that's why it doesn't come to light.
440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call. We want to get the numbers out early. If you have questions about child abuse, about what it is, about how to get help if you suspect that a child is being abused, how to get help if you suspect that you're doing the abusing, give us a call, 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. So, Dr. Clayton, I had never heard of a child abuse pediatrician. So that's a specialty, obviously. Give us a sense of what happens if a patient comes to you. What does that mean if they get on your doorstep?
It means that there's a concern for abuse or neglect. Everybody whom I evaluate and whom my colleagues evaluate, there are 4 of us in this local area. And when we see a child, it means that there have been concerns for either physical abuse, sexual abuse, or neglect of some form. And so just because someone gets to our doorstep doesn't mean that they're absolutely going to be diagnosed with abuse. It depends upon the way that they present, the type of injuries that they have, the age of developmental abilities of the child. So what we do is a comprehensive evaluation to look at the child for abnormal physical exam findings. And we relate those findings to the information we're provided with regarding how the child came to have those injuries. And if there is a disconnect between the exam findings that we're seeing and the history that we're being told or the information we're told as to how those injuries happened, especially if that information doesn't make any sense for the child's developmental abilities. You know, if we're being told, oh, she climbed on something, but she's 4 months old, we know that's wrong. So, you know, we'll do an evaluation based upon the information we have and the exam findings that we're seeing. And with sex abuse, though, it's kind of the opposite. There are lots and lots of children, thousands and thousands of children every year who make reports of sexual abuse or inappropriate types of activity with either another child or with a caregiver. And for those kids, often I feel that investigators have a high expectation that we're going to find something abnormal, when actually the vast majority of the time, I'd say less than like 5% of the time or less, there's no exam abnormalities at all. And that's absolutely the opposite of what people were expecting.
Mm-hmm. So where's the line between disciplining your child, talking to your child, and crossing over into child abuse? Where's that line? And where does it come in? Because there's so many things we teach our children. Like you were just talking about with the sexual abuse, for example. We try to teach kids about appropriate touching and non-appropriate touching, but sometimes they take it to a different level. So I'm just curious as to how the system determines, you know, where that line is, because one parent may think one thing and another parent may think opposite.
That's a good question. It can be a fine line.
What do you say?
Well, Virginia does have laws pertaining to child abuse. And my understanding is that you are allowed to spank your child with an open hand on the rear end, as long as you don't leave a bruise, scar, or anything like that. So anything that goes outside of that could be brought in front of the courts.
Right, if you leave a mark.
Right.
Right. If you leave a mark when disciplining your child, that's something that is reportable.
Well, let's take a case that's elsewhere, so that we're not identifying anything, but it's been in the news a lot lately. The little boy recently in Jasper, Georgia, who was paddled by school officials. They still allow paddling in Georgia schools for misbehaving, and the mother videotaped it and posted it on social media. She says she didn't stop it because the kid had been out of school for 18 days, and she'd already gotten in trouble for not having the kid in school on a regular basis. And so the school officials allegedly said, well, you either let us paddle him or you're going to get back in trouble again for, you know, and have a problem in terms of getting your kid to be in school. So she stood there and videotaped it and posted it on Facebook, saying that she didn't want to get herself in trouble anymore. So that's almost a double abuse in that sense, wouldn't you say?
I'm not sure where that came from. I mean, I'm still trying to understand the logic behind that one.
Right.
But
Right.
I mean,
He was being paddled because he had been absent?
No, he was being paddled because he had a fight with another kid. That was the reason for the paddling. But the mother said she allowed it to go on because she had already been disciplined herself, gotten in trouble with the law for keeping him out of school for 18 days. So I don't know whether there are a certain number of days you have to be in school per year or whatever. But the truant officers had already had discussions with this mom.
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand the point of the social media part of it all, though. I mean, that's where I'm where I'm finding the disconnect is what does posting. I mean, I understand if she's saying, well, I'm doing this protect myself for future risk. I'm gonna keep it in a file somewhere, but to put it on social media, that means you want the whole world to see.
Yeah, and her whole idea was they're beating my kid, they're paddling my kid, and I'm going to show you what's going on. However, I can't stop it because this happened. But my point is paddling as an example. If a school district allows paddling, then as a parent, can you claim abuse? I mean, if you disagree that your child should be paddled, or if paddling is a form of abuse? Because you just said the thing about the open hand law.
Yeah, but that was Virginia law.
Right,
so
that's Virginia. This is Georgia. Right.
So she's got to be aware of the laws in the city, in the country, state that she lives in, and if she doesn't agree with them, then.
But I mean, I guess from that.
Exactly.
But I'm trying to look at it from that 5-year-old's perspective. Yeah. You've got 3 adults in the room. two school officials who are asking you to stand still and they have a paddle in their hand, and your mother is standing there and not coming to your rescue. Psychologically, is that child abuse for that 5-year-old? And I know you can't diagnose it in general, but in terms of looking at symptoms and things that people need to think about and consider as we raise our children.
I would say that's bad parenting. I wouldn't say it's child abuse, but I would say, from a parent's perspective, like Dr. Newby said, I'm not sure the reason for videotaping and then to put it on social media. So then this child is in school and this is going on. I think she actually exacerbated the whole situation by doing that. And that has a whole nother effect on the child.
Well, I think it's traumatic to the child, but
Exactly.
I think it's the fact that his mother videotaped it and felt like she couldn't stop it is a symbol of her own powerlessness. She felt like she didn't have any say in the situation, and posting on social media was her way of getting help.
Well, I guess then you have to look at it from a standpoint of, well, why was the kid out for so long? I mean, 18 days. I mean,
Right.
what's going on in the home front while the kid's not in school? So, as I'm listening to this, as I've kind of, been listening to the conversation as a whole, and I've been quiet because I'm trying to take all this in and say, okay, there's so many fine lines when it comes to that, because some of it seemingly is the interpretation of that child. Because you get some, you can beat that 5-year-old kid. That 5-year-old kid, like, I could care less. That you're doing that. Then you have other ones that are thoroughly traumatized by something. And and it's almost like each child has to be looked at as an individual, because but there's no way to measure that, in terms of from an abuse.
And I think that's why
standpoint.
parents, though, a lot of times get confused too about from the emotional parents and other caregivers. I shouldn't just put this on parents, but anyone who cares for children in terms of that emotional abuse and what that means, and how is emotional abuse described? Because you could just think you're. If you're like I am, I'm a yeller. I'm a very boisterous, I'm out there, kind of person. Other people are more quiet, but it could be the words that they say
Exactly.
that make it different. Is that what the difference is?
Yeah, that's the difference. There's actually a lot of different subtypes of emotional abuse. You can belittle and demean a child. You can threaten a child. You can, you can terrorize a child. There's a lot of different ways to emotionally abuse a child, but the key isn't the volume. As my sister's a shouter, she'll like, "Hey, get down here," and she doesn't mean any harm. She's not like emotionally damaging her kid. She's telling them, "Hey, get down here." But
Just a little bit more with enthusiasm.
yeah, exactly. Or, you can be quiet and be saying some extremely damaging things to a child, which could impact them for a lifetime. So, it's not exactly how you go about it, it's what's being said, just like you alluded to.
So Natasha, then let me ask you, because I'm still trying to get to then if you're not used to a yell, to like your sister, for example, let's use that as an example. If I think that people who yell at their children are abusive, and I'm going to call CASA, who do I call to say this woman is being abusive to her kids because she's always yelling at them?
Child Protective Services, would be
to start.
called if there's a concern.
Okay.
But the only downside about that, though, is like you'll have somebody that would do that, and half their kids all in jail doing. It's like this. You're gonna tell me how I'm raising my child. Your kids are jacked up as all get out. And I say that jokingly, partly, but seriousness on the same side is. There's a true line behind that. And again, and there is not, when you talk about sexual abuse, that's easy. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that one. It's just when you talk about that emotional, you have a kid that doesn't, behave. You're in the store and he's running all over the place, pulling stuff down. You tell him, Johnny, get back here. And Johnny doing whatever Johnny wanted to do. And, that mother is like, listen, I'm getting to that stage. And the kid just pushes. Part of that is just, again, how you raise it. Like, my wife's no joke. But she's never abusive, but she's very, pointed on what she wants to do. And that's where that good parenting part comes in, because you can have a way that and you can read the signs of your child. If you really know your child, you'll know if you're saying something, you see the look on that child's face. It's just like as a doc. I'm careful with how I deliver a message, because I know that patient, so I know what I can say legitimately, and I know they're going to take it one way, and I may talk to another patient and talk to that person entirely
Totally
different.
different way.
So part of it is understanding that piece of it all, and that's where it gets really gray. Is where that is, where that line is. But some things are just, I mean, if you take a kid and you slap them all over the store, I mean, that's obvious. I mean, again, there's certain obvious things. It's just that gray zone is where I'm having my issue.
Natasha, tell us what CASA. Where do you come into the picture? Because you advocate for the child. Is that correct?
Exactly. Yeah. We get involved once the child is before the juvenile court. So we only get involved in a case once a judge has actually appointed CASA and feels that he has a need for an additional set of eyes and an advocate for this particular child. So definitely they wouldn't be calling CASA if if they suspect abuse.
Okay.
No. But we are really, to kind of sum it up in a simple form, we are the voice for the child, but the eyes and ears for the court. CASA came from the standpoint of there was a judge out in Washington, and when you have court cases, the judges don't get a lot of time to really hear everything, and they don't have a good view into really what this child's situation is and what their life is like. So CASA came about because it's just perspective from an everyday volunteer from the community. You don't have to have a certain background or certain degree, but just a concerned citizen. Give me your perspective. And so what the volunteers do, because we are a volunteer-based program, is they get appointed to one particular family. Could have one kid, could have several children, and they get to know that child's situation very well. They know the teacher, they reach out to the therapist, the parents or caregivers, stay in contact with the foster family, CPS or foster care ongoing workers, just to get a good sense of what this child's situation is and what their needs are. Because what we want is we want children in foster care to have the same rights as and access to things that our own children would have. And then we advocate for those before the court system. The ultimate goal is to get those children in a safe, permanent home.
And is the ultimate goal to keep the child within the family, that family structure, or not? Or is it to really get it
It
into
depends
another
because
thing?
certainly a child, the bond with a parent and child is very strong. But there are certain situations, especially with sexual abuse, in which it's just not going to be in the child's best interest to reunify that with their parents. But that certainly is the first step. So in the case of, let's just say there's substance abuse going on in the home and because of that, there was maybe neglect. Well, we want to work with those families to get them the services that they need while the child is safe and then work towards reunification.
Got you. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Joel joins us from Portsmouth, or Joel?
Joel.
Joel. Hi, Joel.
Hi. Yeah, so I was just listening to the part where you were talking about like the verbal abuse. Now I work for a company where I'm in and out of people's house all day long, and I've heard parents just cursing their kids out for the smallest thing. And it's not a yelling thing. It's a cursing. You're bleep, 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 bleep.
Mm-hmm.
Is that actually child abuse, and can something be done about that?
I'll turn to the experts.
I'm standing out of that one too.
Joel, thanks for the call. Dr. Clayton, is that abuse?
Certainly, if a parent's demeaning or belittling the child, calling them names, saying mean things about them, causing them to feel bad about themselves, absolutely. That's emotional abuse.
So if Joel are you still there? Are you still with us?
Yes.
So when you see this, have you ever reported it or said something to the parent or anything?
I've not said anything to the parents because of my job, but I've called my friend. He's a social worker.
Mm-hmm.
And he says it's kind of like a gray area, where I guess you would have to kind of prove it. As to, he said the only thing you can do is call Child Protective Services and get them involved.
Exactly, right. And it's the toughest kind of abuse to prove, honestly.
Okay, Joel, thanks so much for the call. It really is a fine line between the adult parents' rights to raise their children in the way that they want to raise their kids and the government coming in and saying, no, this is not right.
The child has a right too. Child has a right to be loved and respected and nurtured.
See, that's where the point comes in. Let's see. Mark joins us from Norfolk. Hi, Mark. You're on the air.
Good afternoon to all
Good
of you.
afternoon.
I just want to know if anyone knows what the statute of limitations are for child abuse, because I certainly would like to turn in my 81-year-old father and 79-year-old mother.
Well, I don't know the exact numbers, but it varies depending upon the kind of abuse. But I have to say, there are times when I thought my parents were abusing me too. They were so mean. They wouldn't let me go out. They wouldn't let me do this or that. They punished me for that or the other. But honestly, as a grown-up, I see that was simply good parenting.
And thanks, Mark, for the call. We appreciate that. One of the cases when Adrian Peterson, the football player, if you remember, a couple years ago, there became this whole backlash. He said, I was simply disciplining my son. Spanking is a big deal in the African American community. I know we're going to get tons of calls on this, but but then there were others who said, no, everybody talked about how the whooping of their life, and how they all remember what whooping they got versus a spank on the butt, a swat on the butt is discipline. In Virginia, clearly the law says a swat on the butt with an open hand is not child abuse. Am I correct? Did I say that right?
As long as you don't leave any marks, bruises.
As long as you don't leave any marks or bruises. So is it, what about spanking and corporal punishment? Is that child abuse or not?
It's legal in the United States. So in every state in this country, spanking is legal. But there are certainly countries overseas, like I believe it's the Netherlands. It's like one of those Northern European countries where it is illegal. And they found that there's a reduction in their rates of physical child abuse. So although spanking is not illegal, it certainly can be carried too far.
Oh, okay. So let's see.
Otherwise, I wouldn't have a job.
A lot of the issue comes when you talk about spanking. I mean, my mom, she didn't play with me either growing up, but I think a lot of it is about control. Because you can, it's rare I've ever felt that she didn't. Some people just lose control. They don't know how to, okay, you have a defined purpose of what you're trying to do. And sometimes as a child, that was what I responded to the most. I mean, I didn't, you fuss at me, I'm just going to look at you, and I'm like, well, she's going to fuss, I'm fine. But when you talk about, it's certain,
taking it to the next level.
Yeah, so, and that changed how I responded to things. It really did. So, I mean, you can argue that point all day long, but you look at where we are now, kids cuss you out now. They will. And a lot of it's because you have situations where they say, okay, you can't do this anymore. You can't do that anymore. And they use that to an advantage point.
If you're just joining us, we're talking about child abuse and prevention with my co-host on Another View on Health, cardiologist Dr. Keith Newby, Dr. Michelle Clayton with CHKD and an expert on child abuse, and Ms. Natasha Knight, coordinator of Portsmouth CASA. You wanted to add a point, Natasha.
I was just going to say, I think there's a balance to it, because similar to you all, my parents,
I know you're trying to be politically correct.
I learned in other ways than just simple timeout. Let's just put it that way. But I knew that I knew that I was loved. There was a balance in the household. And so I never felt abused. I never felt any of those things, because that wasn't the only communication I had with my parent, or that wasn't the main kind of ambiance in the household. Wasn't out of fear and anger and those types of things. There was a happy balance. So it's difficult to really say.
Dr. Clayton, if you got an 8 or 9-year-old, let's talk about kids who are old enough to be able to verbally speak about what is happening to them. What kinds of things do they tell you, and do they feel that it's a showing of love or it's a showing of abuse? How does the child interpret what's happening to him or her?
That is a great question. The way that our investigative process is set up here. We at the Child Abuse Program, which is where I'm based, we have forensic interviewers, and we also have a whole host of licensed clinical social workers and a couple psychologists on staff, and they conduct individual sessions with kids. So they're the ones who could actually speak to how a child feels about it. Because we have such a group, a terrific group of people who are designed to talk specifically to kids, we actually don't inquire closely because we don't want to have them produce all kinds of conflicting information or make it more difficult for people to figure out what happened to them. Now, children do make spontaneous statements to us, but it's really more about the facts of the case, what happened or who did it, not how they feel about it, because they have another venue in which to talk about their feelings.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. We're talking about child abuse and prevention and what we should be doing to prevent it. Broderick joins us from Virginia Beach. Hi, Broderick. You're on the air.
Good afternoon, panel.
Hi.
How are you doing today?
We're doing great. Thank you.
I guess I have a comment more than a question.
Okay.
My comment is I grew up during the time of corporal punishment. My mother was a school teacher for 33 years. And I came along during the time where you didn't, when I raised my children, you don't promise a child something such as the counting 1, 2, 3. Children are smart enough to know when you've counted enough times that you're really going to be mad enough to do something.
Yeah.
I really feel that people need to not promise. When you tell a child, like my mother would tell me, and she would look at me, that look told me, okay, I'm about to get it, so I would straighten up and fly right. I really feel in today's time, to fit today's time, that we need to, when the doctor says, congratulations, you're pregnant, I really feel the very next word should be out of their mouth should be, all right, so let's set up your parenting classes, because we have a disconnect from parenting today as parenting was when my mother did it, because my mother came along with a child of 9 of sharecroppers in North Carolina, and they built her a stool so that she could get up there and cook and clean and keep all of the children while everybody else went to the field.
Yeah. Each generation has its own set of issues. Yes.
I really feel you really have to, and I've heard people preach this, spare the rod, spoil the child. If you don't beat them, they'll beat you later. But if you really have to, like the panel has said, identify each and every child as an individual. You can have 5 kids, but every one of them is different, and you can a beating to one will make them do what they need to do, and then others, like the doctor said, it means nothing to them. So you have to really identify and try to get children under control at a young age versus when they're in high school.
Thank you so much, Roderick. We really appreciate the phone call. Tanya joins us from Smithfield. Hi, Tanya. You're on the air.
I'm doing good. How are you?
Doing great.
I was calling because I was a volunteer with CASA back in 2004 to 2007. I volunteered with both Portsmouth and Isle of Wight CASA. First, I want to say it's a great experience. So, if you do have a heart for kids, it's one of the most rewarding volunteer programs I've ever been in.
Fantastic. Natasha's smiling well.
Yeah.
We appreciate that.
Also, I wanted to speak on the fact that, with different kids in different situations, with one kid, something could look like or feel like abuse, and with another, it couldn't. I took my daughter one time to the zoo, and there were all these moms, and they were really frustrated, and they were yelling at their kids. And my daughter looked at me, and she was like, "Mom, why are all the mothers so angry?" Because my daughter is the type of person that if you yell at her or raise your voice to her, it would crush her. And I knew that about her. But I had other kids that, we couldn't raise our voices and whatever to them, and it would just go over their head, and we would have to do that secondary level of punishment. So each kid is different, and you have to look at the child, and you have to look at the situation in order to kind of determine what's abuse and what's just the next level of parenting that you might have to do with that particular child.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate your call, Tanya. And I know a lot of people, we're talking a little bit lighthearted about this, but we're talking more at this point about the nuanced child abuse as opposed to those that are, like you said, the sexual abuse or physical abuse where there are marks and whelps and, and things of that sort. 'Cause I don't want anybody to think that we're making light of any of it, because we're not. But we do all have experiences from our parents, that's for sure.
Well, it goes back to that line. I mean, I think we're just, because there's some this clear-cut situations, I think our discussion here is more on that line, because that line is difficult to know where it is.
Exactly.
I mean, it just goes back to that comment both the previous callers made. I agree with them 100%. Even with my daughter, my youngest, I know when I say certain things, I have to watch how I say it, because I know her response is going to be different than my son or my oldest, and again, that's where the good parenting part comes in. You have to understand
know
your children.
Absolutely.
And you have to be able to say, I'm going to switch from one to the other in terms of that. And they may, of course, want to say, well, why you beat me all the time? He gets away with everything. But that's all based on response factor.
Absolutely. Renita joins us from Portsmouth. Hi, Renita. You're on the air.
Hi, thank you. I wanted to make a comment and then ask a question.
Okay.
I believe that the relaxed, or the rules, I should say, as it pertains to discipline for children, kind of contribute to a lot of behaviors that we see in current society. I know that there's a fine line between abuse and discipline, and I would like to see avenues and channels that explain those and define them more for individuals. Because as a teacher, we do see those behaviors spilling over into the classroom and into the building, because parents are maybe afraid to discipline their children in any way, shape, form, or fashion because of the rules. So that was my comment. And then my question is, as a teacher who is required to report any signs of child abuse or any conversations, whether they be valid or invalid, based on perception, I just want to know, how do we handle that? Do we report regardless, or do we kind of determine, hey, this person may be fabricating because they don't want to stay in the house, or do we leave that up to the agencies?
Very good question. Thank you, Renita. Go ahead, Natasha.
I would say to always be careful. I mean, and when I say that, I mean, go ahead and report if you have concerns, because let the professionals handle the actual details and all of that. It's better to report and have it be nothing than to not report and a child is suffering and nobody's saying anything.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Dr. Clayton, did you want to add?
Well, certainly, I just wanted to say that there are people, like in this conversation, I feel like people are confusing disciplinary methods with corporal punishment. Corporal punishment is one disciplinary method, but there are multiple very effective disciplinary methods that can be used, such as withdrawal of privileges. If I take away my son's iPad, he'll burst into tears. Hopefully none of his friends will listen. Or withholding their allowance, or, restricting television. I mean, there are time out. There are tons of effective methods of discipline. People just don't use them effectively and think that their only alternative is to beat their child. But there's lots and lots of ways that people can teach their children how to behave and how to be appropriate without resorting to physical punishment.
Okay. Let's see. Marvin joins us from Richmond. Hi, Marvin. You're on the air.
Hey, how you doing today?
Doing okay.
That's good. I'm just calling because my thing is, I want to know, what is child abuse? Because that thing is so wide and everybody have their own opinion on it. Because like was said earlier, you have some people, they raise their voice. People look at that as child abuse. You powder your kids. People look at that as child abuse. But when or where do the disciplines come in at? Because to me, child abuse is literally hurting your child. And when I say that, I'm talking about punching on them, smacking them, which I've seen people do, smacking a child upside the head. That is not made for discipline. When I grew up, I had to go outside and get my own switch. I'm one of those. I'm a PK. So I came up under what they
that means preacher's kid for anybody who doesn't know. That's what a PK is.
And what I was considered was a holy roll. I came up under one of those holy churches, where people dance and shout. And span the rod won't. That wasn't an option.
Okay.
And me personally, I would have to say I appreciate my spankings because I realized the trouble that they kept me out of. My grandmother raised me, and I can truly say every spanking, pretty much every spanking I got, I deserved. But I was afraid. I wasn't afraid or fearful of my grandmother, but what I was afraid of is if I got caught doing something wrong, what would happen?
Okay. Well, I'm going to read you, and because we don't have a whole bunch of time left, but there is a fact sheet from the 2016 Virginia Coalition for Child Abuse Prevention, and here's what it says about child abuse. What is child abuse or neglect? Under Virginia law, an abused or neglected child is any child under 18 whose parent or any other person responsible for the care of the child does any or all of the following. Okay, 1, causes or threatens to cause a non-accidental physical or mental injury, including but not limited to a child who is with his parent during the manufacture of sale of certain drugs. Number 2, neglects or refuses to provide adequate food, clothing, shelter, emotional nurturing, or child care. Number 3, abandons the child. 4, fails to provide adequate supervision in relation to the child's age and level of development. 5, commits or allows to be committed any illegal sexual act upon a child. And 6, knowingly leaves the child alone in the same dwelling with a person who is not related to the child by blood or marriage and who is a registered violent sex offender. So those are the official definitions. And, one is very interesting. The fails to provide adequate supervision in relation to the child's age and level of development. So basically that's saying if you don't discipline your child, also that could be considered a form of child abuse, correct?
Or neglect.
Or neglect, absolutely. So in couple minutes that we have left, what are some of the let's see if we can get one more call in first. Melinda joins us from Chesapeake. Hi, Melinda.
Hi, how are you?
Okay.
I wanted to just introduce myself very briefly. I am the executive director of Champions for Children Prevent Child Abuse Hampton Roads.
Uh-huh.
And I did want to mention to everyone, I certainly, this has been a very interesting show, and I've listened very intently, but I keep thinking about what happened so very recently at Old Dominion University. Champions for Children, along with In Support of Children at ODU, hosted a luncheon with a Dane County, Wisconsin group of experts, and one is a district attorney there that has initiated a deferred prosecution for his cases coming up with parents that are accused of abusing their children. And we also have looked at a no-hit zone that hopefully will be taken out into Hampton Roads in the near future.
Okay, Melinda, where can one go on the website to find out more information?
Well, right now, the website is championsforchildrenhr.org.
Okay, great.
And the no-hit zone will be coming out very soon, and with it, more information, CHKD will be taking that out in the near future, this summer, actually.
Thank you, Melinda, so much for that call. We appreciate it. Dr. Clayton is smiling about that. Do you know about the no-hit zone?
I certainly do. I sit on the board for Champions for Children, actually, and it's it does business as Prevent Child Abuse Hampton Roads, so it's a local affiliate for the larger state organization Prevent Child Abuse Virginia. And so there's a lot of fantastic advocacy that organization does, and the no-hit zone is one of the recent activities that they're bringing to the forefront, where a zone in which hitting children is prohibited.
Okay. Natasha, we got 2.5 minutes left. Tell us one thing that you want parents to think about or anyone to think about in terms of child abuse, and then how do they reach you at CASA?
If I could say anything, I would say as a society and a community, I would hope that we try to put children on a pedestal and make them precious again, to where we really value them. We are our brother's keepers. We look out for each other. And if you see something that just doesn't look right, don't be afraid to say something.
Great.
Our organization falls under the Friends of the Portsmouth Juvenile Court, and you can reach me at 397-2799, extension 2, or at Portsmouth CASA at fopjc.org.
Fantastic. Thank you. That is Natasha Knight, coordinator of Portsmouth CASA. Thank you. Dr. Clayton?
I think that I certainly agree with Ms. Knight. We need to value and respect our children. If we suspect that something's happening to them, we need to make others aware instead of thinking that we can investigate it ourselves or watch and see what happens, because that doesn't lessen the child's suffering. And I think parents need to remember that parenting's the toughest job they'll ever love. So if they take good care of themselves and nurture themselves, they'll be able to have more to give to their children.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Dr. Michelle Clayton, who is a child abuse pediatrician with CHKD. Keith, you got the last 30.
Well, I'll just say this. One of the things my wife and I talked about was instead of necessarily always feeling like we're punishing, we always have this, it says now we're trying to have our, especially our youngest, earn rewards. In other words, we developed, like say, if you clean up your room, you do this, you do that, then you get X number of points. And by the end of the week, if you did this, you get to do this over the weekend. And we didn't want to make it more like a punishment to say if you don't do something, this happens, but just as a reward system to give them encouragement to do the best they could. So that was one of the things we tried to do.
And if you need help, the Virginia Child Abuse Hotline is 1-800-552-7096. And we'll be right back.
Should know by the way you parked your car sideways that it wouldn't last. See, you're the kind of person that believes in making out once, love them and leave them fast. I guess I must be dumb. She had a pocket full of horses, Trojan and some of them.
Just one of the greatest songs from Prince. The world mourns the loss of yet another music icon. Early yesterday, music legend Prince was found dead in his Minneapolis estate. Our Lisa Godley takes a look at his life, his music, and his impact all around the globe.
Only wanna see you laughing, yeah, in the purple rain, purple rain, purple rain.
Soft-spoken, extremely talented, and always ready to push the envelope. Just a few of the many ways fans describe legendary recording artist Prince. During his nearly 40-year career, Prince topped Billboard's Hot 100 chart dozens of times, including 5 #1 hits. The song that topped the charts the longest came from his soundtrack for the movie Purple Rain.
Why do we scream at each other? This is what it sounds like when doves cry.
When Doves Cry held steady at #1 for 5 consecutive weeks. Born Prince Rogers Nelson, his career took off at the age of 18 when he signed with Warner Brothers and was the youngest producer with the label. He'd released 2 albums before he'd garner mainstream attention with the release of his single 1999. In later interviews, he'd cite artists like jazz great Miles Davis and Grammy winner Stevie Wonder as those who inspired his craft the most. In a 2009 interview, Prince said he felt the industry had gotten away from real music.
It's pretty obvious. There's seems to be a glut of processed, prepackaged, producer-driven music out there right now. So I kind of wish we got back to the days where the music was more like the soul music of the 60s and 70s, where Alicia Keys, I dig. I think she's kind of putting it out there. There's a few out there.
But when he wasn't in the studio making magic or performing before thousands of screaming fans, Prince championed social change, supporting the Black Lives Matter movement, even writing a song he called Baltimore following the death of Freddie Gray.
Does anybody hear us pray for Michael Brown or Freddie Gray? Pieces
His musical genius netted him 7 Grammy Awards and 32 nominations. He won 4 MTV Music Awards, and his 2007 halftime performance at the Super Bowl is considered one of the greatest live performances of all time.
Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to get through this thing called life. Oh no, let's go! Don't lie. The world living in.
Friends say Prince was always writing and recording new songs. When asked about his vault that housed hundreds of unreleased songs, the artist responded this way.
One day, someone will release them. I don't know that I'll get to release them.
The very talented yet humble musician had this to say about himself.
I'm just a little guitar playing man trying to get my thing.
Prince passed away yesterday at his Paisley Park home in Minneapolis. He was 57. For Another View, I'm Lisa Godley.
Rest in peace, Prince. Thank you so much for joining us today. A couple of events of interest. The Association of American Physicians of Indian Origin of Hampton Roads and Hindu Temple of Hampton Roads will hold a free health camp on Sunday, May 1st from 11 to 5 at the Hindu Temple in Chesapeake. 30 doctors are volunteering their time to give medical care to adults and children. Go to anotherviewradio.org for registration information. And conversations continue in our community about race and religion at Virginia Wesleyan College. There are 2 events coming up this week. Monday, April 25th, join our favorite historian, Dr. Cassandra Newby-Alexander, as she talks about spirit voices of an emerging African-American community in 18th century America. And on Thursday, April 28th, it's Race and Christianity in Early Virginia. Visit vwc.edu for more information. And also next Thursday, the 28th, the YWCA Southampton Roads celebrates 11 Women of Distinction at the downtown Norfolk Waterside Marriott. Tickets are still available. Call 625-4248 to find out more. And finally, a very, very cool way to listen to Another View podcast. Go to your app store, either iPhone or Android, and download the brand new WHRO Media app. Another View is there, along with content from all of our radio and television programs. Next week, Dr. Eric Claville joins us with the Claville Report on politics, how socioeconomics play a major role in local and national elections. And also, next Tuesday at 1 p.m., I hope you will tune in to WHRV FM to listen to me host the Thomas Jefferson Hour. We taped the show here in Hampton Roads a couple of weeks ago, and it will air next Tuesday. That means the 26th at 1 p.m. Our theme music was composed and performed by Jay Sennett. Lisa Godley is our show producer. Victor Bowen is our audio engineer, and Kamaria Mason answered our phones. Make it a fantastic weekend, everyone, and let's get together again next Friday at noon for Another View.
Covers me.